Imagine a city of 2.5 million people. Now imagine that in a single day, all its veins are cut. On June 24, 1948, the Soviet Union blocked all roads and railways to West Berlin. The city had 36 days of food left. Stalin was sure the math was on his side. To survive, Berlin needed 4,500 tons of supplies every single day. The standard C-47 transport carries only 3 tons. That means a plane must land every few minutes, 24/7. No room for error. The world expected surrender, but instead of a white flag, the sky hummed with engines. This is the story of the greatest logistical duel in history. Supplying a city by air was considered madness. The air corridors were narrow, only 20 miles wide. Any detour meant being targeted by Soviet fighters. The early weeks of Operation Vittles were chaos. Pilots were exhausted, planes broke down, and cargo piled up on the ground. Berlin was starving. They didn't need a hero. They needed a manager, a man to turn chaos into a rhythmic machine. That man was William Tunner. His first order?
Forget heroism. Give me a boring rhythm.
When William Tunner arrived, he didn't see heroes. He saw a mess. He famously said, "I don't need aces. I need bus drivers who stick to a schedule." Tunner's first act was to institute the one-try rule. It sounded harsh, but it was pure mathematics. If a pilot failed to land the plane on the first attempt because of fog or wind, he was forbidden from attempting a second approach. He had to immediately fly back to base in West Germany, carrying his cargo. Why? Because one plane circling the field disrupted the entire conveyor belt. In Tunner's math, rhythm was more valuable than a single load of grain. Tunner turned the sky into an assembly line. Planes flew at 5 different altitudes with 3-minute intervals, later dropped to 90 seconds. But there was another problem: ground unloading. Previously, pilots would go to the mess hall after landing to grab a snack while their planes were unloaded. Tunner put a stop to that. Now, as soon as the plane landed, a mobile buffet and trucks carrying workers would arrive. The pilots ate right in the cockpit, while the Germans, yesterday's enemies, dropped tons of cargo from the fuselage in 20 minutes. Tunner even hired former Luftwaffe mechanics to service the American planes. He believed no one knew these airfields better than they did. Logistics had erased the boundaries between victors and vanquished. Now there was only one goal: tonnage. By the fall of 1948, it was clear that the existing runways were insufficient. Planes were landing so frequently that the asphalt didn't have time to cool and was literally melting. Tunner needed a third airfield, and he chose a location, a former training ground near Tegel. The problem was that there was no construction equipment in Berlin. All of it had been left behind the Blockade line, so the engineers did the impossible. They cut up the huge bulldozers and asphalt pavers with a blowtorch, loaded them onto transport planes, and welded them back together after landing in Berlin. 18,000 Berliners took to the construction site. Most of them were women, known as Trümmerfrauen, ruin women. They worked 3 shifts around the clock for extra rations. But a new obstacle emerged. A radio tower, controlled by the Soviet administration, stood directly in the glide path of the future airfield. The Soviets refused to remove it, hoping to derail the project. The French commandant of Berlin, General Jean Genet, decided against endless negotiations. On December 16, 1948, he ordered the tower blown up. In response to Soviet protests, he replied succinctly, "The tower no longer exists." Tegel was finished in 92 days, a triumph of logistics and pure engineering audacity.
While the general struggled with supply tables, one lieutenant decided to start his own war. Gail Halvorsen spotted children on the runway. He had only 2 packs of gum, which he split among them. Seeing their delight, he promised, "Tomorrow I'll drop you more candy. When you see a plane flapping its wings, that's me." Halvorsen fashioned parachutes from ordinary handkerchiefs. He dropped chocolate and chewing gum just before landing. Command learned of this only when the raisin bombers were splashed across the newspapers. Instead of punishing the pilot for breaking protocol, Tunner realized it was the best PR stunt in aviation history. Soon, packages of candy began arriving from all over America. By the end of the blockade, 23 tons of sweets had been dropped on Berlin via 250,000 small parachutes. This turned the occupiers into defenders. Logistics had found a way to deliver the most important cargo: hope. But the decisive blow to the blockade wasn't delivered by candy. Tunner needed to prove to Stalin that the airlift's potential was limitless. He announced an Easter parade. The goal: to deliver more coal to Berlin in 24 hours than any train had ever carried. April 16, 1949. A plane landed in Berlin every 60 seconds. 1,398 flights had been made in the past 24 hours. The result? Almost 13,000 tons of cargo in a single day. This was more than the city had received by rail before the blockade. The victory was mathematically complete. On May 12, 1949, the Soviet Union admitted defeat and reopened the roads. The Berlin Airlift lasted 462 days. It cost a huge amount of money and, unfortunately, the lives of 70 pilots. But the project proved one simple truth to the world: engineering and logistics can stop a war more effectively than tanks can. When you have a schedule, calculated risks, and the will to act, even a trapped city becomes an unbreakable fortress. This was the what, where, and why of the Berlin Airlift. Subscribe to see the blueprints of history with us. Thanks for watching.